we're continuing the text in Tosefta Hagigah. This is chapter 2, unit 2. We are here in the middle. It says Ve'od mashlu mashal lema hadavar domeh. No, that we did. Leistera overet b'shet drachim. We discussed it yesterday. 2 roads. One is snow. One is fire. Okay. Here, Maaseh berabbi Yoshua שהיה מהלך באסטרטיה והיה בן זומא בא כנגדו. So Ben Zoma was mentioned earlier as one of the 4 sages who entered the orchard, right? Ben Azai, Ben Zoma. And now Rabbi Yoshua is walking in the street. Stratia is from the Latin strata, which also means layer. And he bumps sort of into Ben Zoma. הגיע אצלו ולא נתן לו שלום. So Ben Zoma, who was junior to Rabbi Yoshua, does not welcome, he does not greet Rabbi Yoshua. אמר לו, מאין ולאן Ben Zoma? Where are you coming from and where are you going to? אמר לו, צופה הייתי במעשה בראשית ואין בין מים העליונים למים התחתונים אפילו טפח. He said, I was watching the creation and there is not between the upper waters and the lower waters even a handbreadth. As it is written, and the Spirit of God hovers over the face of the waters, and it says, as a vulture that stirs up her nest, etc. And he says, מה נשר זה טס על גבי קינו נוגע ואינו נוגע, כך אין בין מים העליונים למים התחתונים אפילו טפח. Just as a vulture flies over the nest touching and not touching, so too there is not even a handbreadth between the upper waters and lower waters. אמר להם רבי יהושע לתלמידיו, כבר בן זומא מבחוץ, ולא היו ימים מועטים עד שנסתלק בן זומא. Rabbi Yoshua said to his students, Ben Zoma is already outside, and in a few days Ben Zoma passed away. So this is somehow related to the first Mishnah in this Tosefta, where we said that you do not teach Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkava to many students unless either you have 2 students or that person is highly intelligent and understanding. But we understood that Maaseh Bereshit is the story of creation. Here it seems like there's a convergence between Maaseh Bereshit as just philosophical musings in the story of creation and some kind of meditation, because Ben Zoma is speaking about the two layers of water, and maybe that's the symbolism of Rabbi Yoshua walking in the Istratia, because the strata, the Roman roads, were famous for being a layer upon layer. That actually they created the foundation for the structure of modern roads. And whereas Rabbi Yoshua is walking on solid ground, Ben Zoma is hovering in upper worlds, and he doesn't even intercept Rabbi Yoshua in his mind's radar. He doesn't see him. So Rabbi Yoshua says, "Where are you?" Like he sort of snaps him out of his thoughts, and he says, "I was tzofeh. I was watching." Meaning he's sort of a passive bystander, watching the act of creation, and the upper water and lower water almost touch each other, and there's not even a handbreadth between them. It's not clear how we should understand that. There are many different commentaries, symbolic and others. I think that this has to do with the sort of instability that a person who meditates at such a deep level feels. This is just like the label that was given to those who engage in the Merkava. They're called Yordei Merkava. It's as if they're sailing in troubled waters. So Ben Zoma also is here. He's sort of floating in midair. losing sort of maybe a sense of direction. He could drown downwards or upwards. And Rabbi Yoshua indeed says, Kvar ben zomami b'chutz, meaning that he is so engaged in this world, in his inner world, or meditation, that he's not going to come back to this world. So later on, we know we have from Hasidic literature the concept of aliyat neshama, the soul rises and sort of connects to the divine. We also have many statements in Talmudic literature that speak about people who parha nishmatam, who lost their soul just floats away because they're in ecstasy. So maybe there is a possibility that someone who is in that state of mind could deliberately decide to not come back to life, to remain maybe in some sort of coma and then pass away. So this is what the Tosefta says here, and then we have, let's see what Mishnah Gimel here, and the last Mishnah here, they moved around a little bit. כל המסתכל בארבעה דברים ראוי לו כאילו לא בא לעולם. מה למעלה, מה למטה, מה לפנים ומה לאחור. Whomever tries to analyze those four things would rather not have been born at all. And what are they? What is up, what is down, what is before, what is after. So the up and down, it's not clear, like what do they refer to? Of course, they looked at the world as being made of layers, the earth being the lower layer, and then there are seven heavens, and maybe even 7 lower layers under the earth. But they say that at a certain point you have to be limited. And lefanim u'le'achor could be understood as what was before creation or before God, and what will be at the end of the world. And with all these things are saying that human beings should remain within the confines of the finite mind and not try to reach beyond it into the infinite, because it's dangerous. And as I mentioned yesterday, I think it is true even today that we know from people who practice meditation, and on the other hand, the people who are theoretical mathematicians, that this could happen. One can sort of get totally wrapped in the infinite and not be able to find back his place into the in the finite world. As scientific and logical that we want to be, we realize that our thought process, and now actually we know better than we understood it in the past, that our brain is basically a supercomputer, which is so advanced that there are still no computers that have the computational power of the human brain. This has not been achieved yet. I know it sounds strange. You think, wow, the computers that we have today are so powerful and so fast. So that is really what they are. They are faster than human brains, but they're not more intelligent than human brains. They can perform mechanical tasks faster than human brains do that. But the number of connections of the neural networks that we have within our brain is way beyond what machines have. Now we're transitioning into a stage where people speak about deep neural networks, where computers are linked together and are taught not by programming, but rather by learning from experience. They learn human actions and speech patterns, etc., to create their own. But we're still far away from creating a computer that will have the equivalent power of a human brain, and that will be, some people predict it will be around 2050. Who knows? Maybe it will be before that. But once that is that barrier is breached, things will move much faster. That's just an interesting thought. I mean, for that you should read Ray Kurzweil, The Singularity is Near. And so if we think of the brain as such a supercomputer, we can realize that just as a computer could go haywire, right, or crash, a brain could also go through this because of an activity that was induced by the owner of that brain, or by the person who is the brain. Let's put it this way. So it's not so far-fetched to think that just by sitting and thinking or meditating, one could cause physical damage or neural damage to himself. Does that seem too impossible? A little bit, but maybe because we are not capable ourselves of harnessing the full capacity of our brain. So, but anyway,
I think that our brain. I would agree with that. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of how our brains work.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing, in both professionally and having personal experience in my family with individuals who are suffering from various emotional disorders and mental illness. We don't have a clue really about all the multitude of ways that our experiences affect us and how we affect our. It's so complex.
It is. I agree. There is a field of science that started developing only in the last 20 years, which is called neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity speaks about technically as it is, the plastic qualities of the brain. The brain is flexible. The brain can learn and change and grow. Up until that time, people thought that the brain, once it reaches its full size, never changes, never grows again, and whatever is lost is lost. There are two fabulous books by the same author, I think Norman Deutsch. The one is called the Brain That Changes Itself, or The Mind That Changes Itself, and the second one is extremely important, I think, to anyone who's not only in the medical field but also in education or in pain management, and that is the brain's way of healing. And it is not an easy book to read, but it really opens up so many new layers in our brain and how we can control and access certain areas of our brain. And I think that in a way, this all the mystical teachings from all around the world, not only Judaism. Judaism is not unique here. The uniqueness of Judaism is that it ties its teachings to texts that, according to traditionalists, they are divine. According to others, they might be not, but they have on their own already, like we said yesterday, a very unique approach to the human condition. But so the uniqueness of our mysticism is, for us, because it's part of our culture, and because we understand that certain facets of our culture really are revolutionary, like the idea of the that we are created in the image of God, and that all humans are equal, and the idea of rest and the importance of learning. So all these factors helped develop the Jewish mysticism in a certain direction. In any case, let us move to the next text here, which is from the Talmud. So already in the Talmud was, when we go back, now that we talk about texts from the rabbinical period, we are a little bit in flux, because it's not clear when you look at rabbinic period, at rabbinic literature, what was written when. Let me say what we do know about rabbinic literature, what dates are sort of anchored. The dates of the Mishnah, we know that the Mishnah was written or edited somewhere between 210 or 225, around that time. So that we have. The text of the Mishnah itself could have been dated from the generation before the editing of the Mishnah, or all the way back to 300 years earlier. But there could be layers that one generation wrote, the next generation commented on it. Now, with the Tosefta, which we just read, it's a different story because the Tosefta originally started as a simultaneous creation with the Mishnah, but later on, when the Mishnah received this the priority or the hegemony over the rest of the texts, the text of the Tosefta became subjugated to the Mishnah, so it was given to changes. People would change the text in order to fit it with the Mishnah. So here we have less clarity regarding the exact time of the authors. When we come to the Talmud, even more complicated, because the Talmud, people believe traditionally that the Talmud was canonized at around the 5th or 6th century by Rav Ashe and Ravina in Bavel, and in Eretz Israel, in Israel, about 100 years earlier, by Rabbi Yochanan. But the truth is that the Talmud was never canonized. It was left open-ended. It was left in a stage of, I wouldn't say disarray, but just like as a living text, people kept studying and commenting on the Talmud. The only thing is that from about the year 500 to 700, there were several generations of rabbis called the Savoraim who added text to the Talmud anonymously. So when you look at the text, you could think it is all written by the same author, but there could be entries that came from later authors, and they might have looked at an external text and changed the Talmudic text. So this we have to have in mind when we go to look at this text in Hagigah, which is the Talmudic commentary on the Tosefta and the Mishnah that we looked at earlier. And here, this is a Baraita, which is a Tanaitic text that did not make it into the Mishnah. And here's the story. Ma'aseh betinok ehad shehaya koreh bevet rabo בספר יחזקאל והיה מבין בחשמל ויצאה אש מחשמל ושרפתו וביקשו לגנוז ספר יחזקאל. אמר להם חנניה בן חזקיה, אם זה חכם, הכל חכמין הן. So here we have an interesting incident, a horrible incident actually, involving a youth who was reading the book of Ezekiel in the house of his teacher, and he was able to comprehend the electrum. So I don't know if the electrum is a good translation. Maybe we have to stick with the word hashmal in Hebrew. But it says fire came out of the electrum and burned him, and they sought to suppress the book of Ezekiel due to the danger it posed. Hananiah ben Hizkiah said to them, if this you'd happen to be wise, are all people wise enough to understand this book? So what have we got here? We have the story. Story is of a young. It's not tinok in modern Hebrew is baby. In rabbinic literature is somewhat of a teenager, a youth. He studies the book of Ezekiel, and as John commented yesterday, that's where we find the story of Merkava, of the divine chariot. And he was analyzing, he was able to understand the meaning of hashmal, which in modern Hebrew is electricity, but definitely not back then. And fire came out and burnt him. So we don't know if it's physical fire, or that he just died, and that's an exaggeration. In any case, they wanted to when they say lignoz, it really means not to suppress, to bury the book of Ezekiel. So the rabbis are willing to bury the book because of the danger, because of what happened with this youth. But there's this man Hananiah ben Hizkiah, Ben Gurion. There are several incidents that happen in his attic, in his hall of study, and he says this is an exceptional kid. He was very wise. He was able to delve into this material, but not everyone is capable of doing that. Now, we don't know. I mean, maybe some people do see it in that way, that this is a valid story, But what is the validity of that story in the sense of that there was that boy who read and studied, and they were about to bury the book because of that. So that's an interesting comment, that if there was an intention to bury the book of Ezekiel, not necessarily because of an incident such as that, but rather because they were afraid of the esoteric knowledge in the in Ezekiel, and they just wanted to hide. So maybe this was sort of an excuse to just suppress the book, right? So the truth is, if you look at Tractate Shabbat, page 13b, we have this. First of all, they speak about the people who went up to visit the upper story of Hananiah ben Hizkiah ben Geron. This is when the house of Shammai outnumbered the house of Hillel, and they decreed 18 matters on that day. It so happens that I also wrote about this week, and this what seems like a peaceful process of democratic voting. They just decided, we are going to decide on all those 18 things. The people who were up there left their friends downstairs, with swords and spears, to make sure that nobody makes it in. So it's also more like a coup d'etat. Yeah. But at the same time, we find here this statement: Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav, ברם זכור אותו האיש לטוב וחנניה בן חזקיה שמו, שאלמלא הוא נגנז ספר יחזקאל, שהיו דבריו סותרים דברי תורה. מה עשה? העלו לו 300 גרבי שמן, וישב בעלייה ודרשן. Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav, this man is remembered for the good, and his name is Hananiah ben Hizkiah. It's the same person that we have from the story of the esoteric learning. If not for him, the book of Ezekiel would have been suppressed because of its contents. It's nice how they translate. I don't know if this is the art scroll that they translated suppressed, or maybe no, this is Steinsaltz. It really is. They would have buried it. Nignaz is no one would ever have any access to the book. Many of its details contradict matters of Torah. So here we have a completely different tradition that says the reason that they wanted to suppress or bury the book of Ezekiel is that there are contradictions to halachic matters. Two of those contradictions are explained elsewhere. One is that whereas the Torah says that a regular Kohen can marry a widow and only the high priest cannot marry a widow, Ezekiel says that the regular Kohanim can only marry the widow of another Kohen. And he also suggests that nevela utrefa, certain types of dead animals, cannot be eaten only by the Kohanim, meaning that the rest of the people are allowed to eat them. So they had to go, Hananiah ben Hizkiah went into some sort of would say mental exercises to prove that Ezekiel does not contradict the Torah. So it is possible also that they, without a specific cause, even just reading the beginning of Ezekiel, the rabbis were scared of the book, and they would try to find reason to bury it. But there was a debate going on, and eventually Hizkiah, this man, was able to convince them to keep the book in the canon, which is a testimony to the greatness of the rabbi, that eventually they were able to do that. When we go back to our text, of that kid, right? Hagiga here. My hashmal. So now the Talmud says, as the question, when I say the Talmud, this is probably where the anonymous authors come in, the Savoim, and they ask, what is the meaning of the word hashmal? Amar Rav Yehuda, Hayot Esh Memalelot. He breaks the word Hashmal into an acronym of Hayot, animals, Esh, fire, Memalelot, speaking. So it's really, I would say, very unlikely that is the original meaning of the word, right? To have one syllable, one consonant represent a word, ha-sh-mal. It's not there. And we really don't know what is the meaning of the word. It's just to judge by the fact that it has 4 consonants, we might assume that it's not an original Hebrew word, because in Hebrew, words, verbs either have 2 letters or 3 letters root, and if they have 4, usually it's a 2 consonants that double themselves, like galgal, tzratzar, etc. It's the same 2 letters that repeat. This word most probably has a Persian influence because Ezekiel was in Bavel. So, but the Talmud of Yehuda provides this kind of explanation. There are sometimes hashot, from the word le'ahshot, to be quiet, and sometimes they speak. בשעה שהדיבור יוצא מפי הקדוש ברוך הוא חשות, ובשעה שהדיבור יוצא מפי הקדוש ברוך הוא ממללות. When the divine speech emerges from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, they are silent. And when the divine speech does not emerge from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, they speak. I think just here we're at the stage again of people meditating and maybe having this ecstatic experience that the movement here is an abstract movement. There's a sense of movement and a sense of maybe floating or being in limbo, just like we read about Ben Zoma, who says that he's a passive bystander looking at the waters, right, upper water, lower water, or the sense of walking on a bridge where you have fire on one hand and snow on the other hand. Here, one is hanging between silence and speech, and just as to draw an analogy, we know people who speak in tongues. When people speak in tongues, basically there's some kind of being possessed by a spiritual experience, and creating new connections or new neural networks that allow people to speak in a different way. So maybe this is what we have here. So we have little indications here and there peppered throughout, like the Talmud and the other literature, that people did have some kind of spiritual experience, but we don't have actual text that they study. The main text that is mentioned so far is the book of Ezekiel. But later in the same section in the Talmud, they discuss the text from Ezekiel, and and they look at the text from Yehezkel. Va'ereh hayot, ve'ine ofan ehad ba'aretz etzel hayot. Another verse in the same chapter states, "Now I beheld the divine creatures. Behold, one wheel, ofan, was upon the earth near the divine creatures." What is this ofan? Amar Rabbi Elazar. This wheel is a certain angel who stands on the earth, and its head reaches the divine creatures. So this in itself, the word hayot. When you think of, we didn't go into the text of Ezekiel. I assume that everybody knows the text, but when you look there, you see reference to hayot, ofanim, srafim, different types of angels or fiery angels. There is an analogy to, it means they're using the metaphors of animals, lion, ox, eagle. A lot of scholars say that what you see there is a reflection of the imagery that was abundant in Babylonia. If you ever saw the gates of Ishtar, these are the images there. So, but it's very possible that when a prophet is in that state of mind, sort of ecstatic experience, he conjures images that he's already familiar with. So this is what happens there with Ezekiel. But in any case, the Talmud now speaks about the Ofan. One second. So the only reference to Ofan in the other than Yehezkel is in the book of Shemot in Exodus, when the Egyptians followed the Israelites into the ocean, and also in the book of Melachim, of the book of Kings, when he speaks about the construction of the Bet HaMikdash, of the temple. So it seems that Ofan is indeed a wheel, but it could also be the axis or the axle of the wheels. It's not clear, but it would make sense to think of the vision of Ezekiel as a wheel, because the wheel is something that moves. It's that kind of something that's in the twilight zone between the living world and the inanimate world. Just as water is something that connotes movement, the wheel is something that is an object but could move sort of on its own. So maybe that is the sense of cycle. That's something that goes on in a circle. We see later on that the imagery of tabat, of a ring, and of a circular movement is very prevalent in mystical writings. So Rabbi Elazar says this is one angel which stands on earth, and his head reaches all the way up to the animals. Here we already see a very clear example of anthropomorphic discussion. That they don't say whatever Ezekiel said, whatever Yehezkel says is a metaphor, is an analogy, should not be taken literally. They speak of it as if there is some kind of a royal court with chariots, with animals, with wheels, and so on. But if that is not enough, b'matnita Tana, it was taught in a baraita, in an external Mishnah. This angel is named Sandalphon, and he is taller than his colleagues by a distance of 500 years. Not light years, but walking. So how far can you walk in 500 years? It's I guess a couple of thousands of miles, or a million miles. I don't know. But still, the idea of an angel whose height can be measured by human means seems very strange. Or am I right? This is something that when you think of, when we talk about angels as spiritual beings, we have to ask really the question of what is the role of angels in the Torah. So if you realize that up until the book of Daniel, we don't have any angels who is mentioned by name. And we can understand every other occurrence of angel in the Torah as either a metaphor or the idea of a messenger, that the whole natural world is a messenger of God. But the rabbis took the story in rabbinical time. We have that understanding that the angels do have dimensions, and it's really not a far leap from here to come to the point of looking at the God as having dimensions. We're so used to in our culture today to following the philosophy of Maimonides, and the other philosophers who fought incessantly against those who gave human shape to God. But that was at the beginning of mysticism, and then later on in waves, that was a central concept in mystical teachings, where they talk of God as a being with dimensions, not sphirot, but rather hands and body, and they talk about the height, etc. And here, this angel called Sandalphon stands behind the chariot, and he weaves crowns for his maker. So, I'm not sure that this should be the exact translation. Kosher ktarim lekono, likshor keter literally means to tie the crown on one's hand. So this ain't now. What can you tell me about the name Sandalphon? What does it sound like?
Greek.
Okay, any word that you recognize?
Sandals.
Sandals, right. It's the same word in Hebrew, sandal, but it's taken from, right? So here's another word that has four letters, 4 consonants, and it's not a Hebrew word. From sandal, we have sandal. We also have sandlar, or sandler, which is shoemaker. And so this obviously is not a Hebrew word. And so here the question, of course, emerges: is it a Hebrew word? Is it what was borrowed by the rabbis here? Was it only the name, or the whole concept? Meaning, did they think of angels and just name them using terms that they knew from Greek, or the whole idea of angels bearing names is a Greek one? So some scholars say that yes, this whole concept is Greek. There's the more famous angel that is mentioned in quite frequently in the Midrashim, and even made its way into some prayer books, is Metatron. That here definitely you hear the meta, the above, Metatron. So he's the sort of the archangel, the one who is in charge of all other angels, and he has this Greek name. And interesting enough, there are many people who are within the study of mysticism, of Kabbalah, and would not utter his name. They would say Memtet, because they're afraid to say the word Metatron, because it's the name of an angel. So it's almost as if they're saying God's name in vain. So that we'll see later on when we read the writings of those people who criticize Kabbalah, that this is one of their concerns, because what happened within the study of mysticism is that people attributed, on one hand, they attributed human dimensions and qualities to God. On the other hand, they attributed divine power and levels of sanctity or of separation to angels. And they created like sort of an intermediary between humans and God. Later on, it will evolve into a separate school called Huga Kruva Miyuhad, the circle of the designated angel. Kruv in the sense of cherub, not as the modern Hebrew kruv, which is cabbage, but Huga Kruva Miyuhad, the circle of the unique or designated cherub, or as other scholars would call it, Hakavod Anivra, the created glory. And that was sort of a compromise between the idea of God who has no image, who we do not see and cannot connect to, and that definitely does not have human dimensions, and between all the texts, the biblical texts that speak of God in human terms, and all these mystical texts that also speak of God in human terms. So the compromise was to discuss some kind of an entity called a Kavod Anivra, the glory that God created, and that glory or that angel or that intermediary has human dimensions. They're not proportions, but meaning it's way bigger than a human being, like we see here, 500 years, etc. But it has a human shape, a human image. So now here the Talmud asks the question: Ini, is that so? Meaning, is that so that the angel could tie crowns to his maker? V'aketiv baruch kevod Adonai mekomo. We read in Ezekiel that the angels say, "May the glory of God be blessed from wherever He is," meaning that even the angels don't know where God is. Miklal de mekomo leka de adale. So that shows that no one knows where God is. And the answer is the Amar Shem Ataga ve'azal ve'yativ bereshe. The angel says a name for the crown, and then the crown goes and sits on God's head of its own accord. So this is really very strange. This is an example of a later addition to the text. You see how we switch from the Hebrew of the Matanita, of the Baraita, to the Aramaic of Ini. Is it so? And we don't know who says that. This is a typical for later authors to come and look at an earlier text and ask a question that did not occur to the original author. So they say, how can you say that if we say that no one knows where God is? But that is not necessarily the original meaning of the text. And to ask that question is to say that the angel who serve and praise God, even I'm talking within that worldview, right, of God as sitting in a royal court, to say that no one knows where God is interesting and intriguing. If you look at other biblical passages where God is described as sitting in a divine court, for example, the book of Job, right? We have Vahi Bayomahu, Vayavo Bnei Elohim Lityatzev Al Adonai, Vayavo Gam Hasatan Betocham. So the angels come and stand by God. So sort of the imagery that they had is that the angels know where God is and they know how to access Him. So this kind of question is sort of forced on the text. This is not really the question that one has to ask, and the answer itself is problematic, where the author says that the angel uses a divine name to make the crown float and go and sit on God's name. So here we have this kind of a strange transition between the practical world and the mystical or the abstract world, that there is a real crown that has to travel and sit on God's hand. And if there's one crown, why do you need another crown? Why is it in plural? So they sort of expire after a while. So obviously the original text that says about that the angel is kosher ktarim lekono refers to the idea of praise, that it's not a physical crown that is placed on God's head, but rather the what we know from other sources, the song of the angels in front of God, and in that sense that they are constantly kosher ktarim is constantly creating new crowns, new ways to praise God. So this is as I said, it's in the Talmud, so it could be anywhere. The original text could be somewhere from the 2nd, 3rd century, and the commentary from 200-300 years later. But from the same period, we have the very famous Sefer Yetzirah, which is probably the first organized mystical text that we have. There's a debate regarding the exact time of the creation or the authorship of Sefer Yetzirah. The first commentary that we have on it is by Rav Saadia Gaon from mid-10th century, and so we know it predated it. But what we have another method to date the text is that it's quoted by the poet who lived in Eretz Israel, Rabbi Elazar Kalir, and since Rabbi Elazar Kalir we know lived somewhere between the 5th and 7th century, this text must have predated him. So different opinions in scholarship put the date of the general time of the writing of the book between the third, fourth, the third and fifth century. This is around the time that it was written. It has Mishnaic style, and it is broken into sort of a chapter and a Mishnah. And the language, as expected, is esoteric. So we will go through the text. This is one branch of the early mystical literature. This is one. The other one is, we just started touching on it, is the Safrut Echalot, is the literature that is about traveling into the upper world. It's about maybe meditation. There are texts that are particularly about meditation, and they give the travelers methods and tools of how to travel, what to say at every point of the journey. And there are certain texts that are written as songs of hymns and psalms that are definitely ecstatic. And that is an experience that people who go through certain types of meditation would experience, as if there's fire everywhere, or there are amazing sights everywhere, and there's a sense of emergency, of speaking fast. So you will see later on, we'll see in Safrot Echalot, just a conglomeration of adjectives and of words, just redundancy, because you can't, one cannot control his power of speech. So we are going to, in the next session, we're going to start reading and analyzing Sefer Yetzirah. Of course, not the whole thing, as much as we are able to do within our time frame. So let's stop here for now, and the next session will be we will start with Sefer Yetzirah.